Hello, good day. I hope you are having a good day. So in this lecture video, we will be talking about participants of the study. So when you say participants of the study, it refers to the respondents or the informants. So when will you call them respondents and when will you call them informants? So you will call them respondents if you are letting them answer in your survey questionnaires. But if you are having a live interview, so they are informants. So how will you determine your number of respondents then? So that is our main focus today. We will be talking about sampling techniques and the formula in determining your sample size for the larger population. So sampling designs, whether a research design is descriptive or experimental, sampling is necessary, especially if the 4Ms are limited. So what are these 4Ms of a researcher? So I'm referring to the man or the manpower, the money, the machinery, and the material. So if your resources are limited, so it is not feasible for you to have the universal sampling for larger population size. So in having a sampling survey, there are steps that we need to consider. So you may not undergo all of these steps, but in most cases, you will. So first you have to state the objectives of the survey for you to really determine who are most suited to be your respondents in your research. And you have to define the population, whether it is too small or is it too big, and then select the sampling individual. Of course, it is in accordance to the need of your study. Number four is you have to locate and select the source list of particular individuals to be included in the sample. So for example, if you are conducting a research in your university, then you may request a list from your university registrar. If you are trying to conduct a study about the toddlers of a certain barangay, then you may ask your barangay health workers to provide you with the list of toddlers in that certain barangay. So number five, we have to determine the sample size by using a formula, and this is applicable for the big population. So if you are just having a small population, then you better use the universal sampling to have the higher confidence level. So number six, you have to decide the sampling design to be used. That's why in this lecture video, we will be talking about the sampling designs or the sampling techniques and the formula also on how to determine the sample size for larger population. So here I am giving you a sample formula in determining a sample size for larger population, and this is usually used by the researcher. It's called the Slavins Formula. So let N be our sample size and the uppercase N be our population size, and then the E, or I'm referring to the small e or the lowercase e, so that's the margin of error. So if you want a 95% confidence level, therefore your margin of error is 0.05 or 5%. So if you want a 98% confidence level, then your margin of error would be 0.2 or 2%. So let's try to apply this formula. So for example, if you are trying to determine the language skills or the language efficiency of the AB English students of your university, and then the entire AB English population is 300. So that would be our population size. So how will you know the number of samples that you need in order to represent the entire AB English students? So you need to use this formula. We have 1 plus the sample size multiplied to the square of the margin of error. So this is our result. We have 171 needed samples. So this is more than 50% of the sample, or of more than 50% of the population size, because some researchers would not use a formula and just have the majority or 50% plus 1 as their sample size. But when you use the formula, it is more scientific. So I hope that now you are having an idea on how you will determine your sample size. This is applicable for quantitative research. But for qualitative research, you don't need to consider the number of respondents, because quantity is not an issue. Quantity of response is not an issue, but how long you will collect data from the participants. So the quality of the responses is our concern in qualitative study. So data should be collected until there is a qualitative isomorph. So what do you mean by qualitative isomorph? So for example, you are using a convenience sampling, and then you interviewed 5 informants already, and their response to your interview question is just similar. So you better stop on the 5th informant that you try to interview, because the answers are similar from informant 1 to 5. So if you know that you already hit the quality of information that you needed for your research, then you may stop, and that's called qualitative isomorph. So when redundancy with respect to information occurs until no new insights are gained, and only confirmation of previous theories. So that's the time that you have to decide that you will stop. That's the difference between the quantitative and the qualitative study, because in quantitative you need to respect the quantity of responses, while in qualitative you need to respect the quality of the responses. So the researcher decides when enough participants have been sampled. So in scientific or no non-scientific sampling, we will differentiate this two. In scientific sampling, each member in the population is given an equal chance of being included in the sample. So in scientific sampling, there is less bias because everyone has the chance to be involved. Everyone has the chance to be included as a sample. For example, in the entire population of the AB English students, you are not having the bias to select that person because that person will surely agree to my hypothesis or to my argument of my study. So not that one. But in non-scientific sampling, not all of the members in the population are given an equal chance of being included in the sample. But in qualitative study, this is very common, the non-scientific sampling, because the researcher has the need to judge of who are the right respondents for his or her research. So let's try to see some kinds of the scientific sampling. So we have the random sampling. Both the restricted random sampling and the unrestricted random sampling will be done if your respondents or the population size is homogeneous. So what do you mean by homogeneous sampling? So it means that they are at the same age, they are at the same gender, they are at the same population, they are at the same geographical area. So that's homogeneous. So they are having the same characteristics. So when you say restricted random sampling, there is an added qualification. The researcher would add a certain qualification in choosing the samples. But in unrestricted random sampling, there's no restriction. So both the restricted random sampling and the unrestricted random sampling may be done through lottery or table of random numbers. So what's the difference between lottery or table of random numbers? When you say lottery, you just have to pick, and the chance of being chosen as the sample for that certain research relies on the luck of the picking of the researcher. So example, I have here rolled papers with the names of everyone in the sample population. So I have to pick, okay, this is my first respondent, second, this is my second respondent, then third respondent. That is lottery. So it is a matter of luck. And then and table of random numbers also is that you have to indicate numbers for everyone in the population, and then you will say you will count what, for example, you want the fifth respondent to be the sample of your study. So you will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 first respondent, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second respondent, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 third respondent. So that is table of random numbers. So number 3, you have the stratified random sampling. When you say stratified random sampling, you divide your population into strata. So an example of this that will suit to the sample proposals of my students would be uh, for the subject. Let me use the subject as an example for it to be more understandable. So my students use the advertisements, Philippine advertisements, to assess the successing of the language. So in order to stratify the advertisements, he classify it into the advertisement for cars, the advertisement for food, the advertisement for clothing. So for example, that one is already a 3 strata of the subject. So when you have the respondents, you classify your respondents according to the characteristics. You may classify them by gender, by age, or by employment. So you will get a sample or samples from different strata. So for example, you will get 5 respondents from the female. You will get 5 examples from the male. So that is stratified random sampling. But still, the way you pick the sample is still random. So it can still be by lottery or table of random numbers. So next we have the systematic sampling. This is quite similar to the table of random numbers, where you indicate a number for each population sample. So for each respondent in a population sample. So if you have to choose the fourth, for example, so the fourth, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we have the Abigail, um, Barbie, Catherine, Dayon, Catherine, then Donna. So Abigail, Barbie, Catherine, Donna. So you have to choose Donna as the fourth and then continue, and then you will count again first, second, third, fourth, then number four is your sampling. So it can also be through alphabetical. So you can A, B, C, D, and you want all the A like that. That's systematic sampling. Multi-stage sampling is applicable if you are having a sample size of a bigger geographical area. So you have to multi-stage it. You have to get some respondents from the province, and then down to the municipality, then down to the barangay, and down to your puro. So you may get 5 from the province, 5 from the municipality, 5 from the barangay, 5 from the puro. So in that case, there is a sample for per stage. So there is less bias when it comes to that. So cluster sampling is quite similar also to multi-stage sampling. It's just that it is not in hierarchy. So that's the term. It's not in hierarchy. So in cluster, there are at equal level of characteristics, like for the municipality of Karkar, Sibunga, Argao. So when you try to measure the phonological differences of the language as used in Southern Cebu, then your respondents might be a cluster from cluster Karkar, cluster Sibonga, cluster Argao, cluster Dalagat, and so on. So that's cluster sampling. So now let's go to the non-scientific sampling, which is usually used in the qualitative study. So we have here the purposive sampling is of course from the word purpose. So you base your respondents on the purpose of your study, and this rely on the judgment of the researcher. So you, as a researcher, you have to judge who is the most suited for your research. That's purposive sampling. So for example, if you are studying about the language efficiency of the students, so you have to determine who are the students who are ought to have a higher language efficiency. So perhaps you will be expecting the AB English language students uh, to be a good communicator both in oral and written. So that's why you are inspired to conduct a study in order to determine if there are things that need to be done, or if there are some problems encountered by the students that can be addressed by your research. So number two is incidental sampling. It's just like you waiting at the gate for students to go out, and the first one to go out would be your first respondents. The second to go out would be your second respondents, and the third to go out would be your third respondents, and so on. So that's incidental, or that is also called convenient sampling or accidental sampling, because you don't mean who will be your respondents, but you depend on the incident. So you just rely on the incident on who will go out first at the gate. So number three is a quota sampling. It means that you have a target number of samples. So for example, you want 20 respondents, so you just try to pick. This is quite connected to incidental sampling. So you may use purposive sampling to reach your quota. You may use incidental sampling to reach your quota. So that one. Number four is the snowball sampling. When you say snowball, when you throw it, when you started to throw it, it's small, but as it roll and roll, it becomes bigger. So it's like referral. This is actually the technique of the networking business, that you use referral. So for example, I am the researcher and I want to study about the language efficiency of the teachers. So you might be asking your first respondent, who is a teacher, that, Mom, do you have or can you recommend a friend who is also a teacher who can be a respondent of our study also? So that's snowball sampling. So of course that teacher has a lot of friends who are also teachers, so probably he or she can recommend someone or other respondents for your research. So that's snowball sampling. Of course, there is a quota also for that. So quota is applicable to all this kind of sampling. So number 5, the last kind of non-scientific sampling that I will give you is the expert sampling. So it's quite similar to purposive sampling. You need to identify who are the expert of this area that you need to you need to gather for a focus group discussion, for example. So if you are studying uh, about the administration, then you have to gather the experts in administration. So just like that, if you are studying about medicine, then you may have the doctors as your samples. Or in any fields that you want to just try to judge who are the experts of that field. So I hope that this short lecture video is clear to you, and if you have some questions, you may just comment below, or if you want me to talk about a certain topic which is now bothering you, then just comment down below. Thank you for listening to this short lecture video, and I hope that you will still uh, explore different sources aside from this lecture video of mine. Thank you and keep learning.